Hakim is difficult to understand, and his ability to speak English falls below the standards we usually use for broadcast on Dreamland. However, he visits the United States so very rarely, we felt that it was important for him to get his message across to you. He teaches in the ancient Egyptian tradition as handed down through his family for thousands of years, and he is very well worth listening to, but it's hard. So we apologize for that and have done everything we can, I can assure you, to enhance his voice for the purposes of this broadcast. And now here's William.
Abdel Hakim Awan is a tour guide of sorts. For decades, he's been giving guidance to explorers and spiritual pilgrims at the sacred sites, the energy centers along the Nile in Egypt. Hakim has tapped into an ancient oral tradition of Kemet. The ancient name for this land, as it was known long before the Greeks called it Egypt. A term used to describe Hakim is the word that is still in use for a vanishing breed, the dragoman. This Turkish word for interpreter meant the multilingual high official who stood to the Sultan's right at court and facilitated his communications with ambassadors and heads of state and guided visiting dignitaries to the great showplaces of the capital and the empire. Thus, a dragoman had the skills of a diplomat, a scholar, a secretary in the classical sense, literally a keeper of secrets, a vizier or a wise man, and an entertainer, all rolled into one subtle but brilliant package. Hakim is a dragoman. Also on the line with us is Stephen Mailer, an author who's been sitting at the front of Hakim's class for well over 10 years. His two books, Land of Osiris and From Darkness into Light, will give you a scribe's eye view of Hakim's vision of ancient Kemet. His revolutionary course in the indigenous wisdom of ancient Egypt at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, is the first such course ever to be taught anywhere, and it's based on Hakim's teachings about ancient Kemetian language and science, culture, and spiritual practice. Hakim and Stephen, welcome to Dreamland.
Thank you, William. William, it's always a pleasure to be on with you.
Truly. Thank you so much. Hakim, welcome back to the U.S. I noted that the last time you were here was in 1986 when you were here and became well known as a peace diplomat who made a tour of Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Denver, L.A., and Memphis and other cities. And your message to America then, as it still is now, is simple. The Egyptian people are people of peace, and they love peace. Can we begin by talking about that? What prompted you to return to the U.S. at this very special time?
Well, it's the same purpose. It's love, light, and peace. That's my return to the United States.
And love, light, and peace.
Love, light, and peace.
And Stephen, it's got to be an incredible honor, Stephen, to have your teacher, your friend, your inspirer here in the United States with you in Boulder. How's the visit been going?
It's something that can't even be put in words, William. This is a dream for me for many, many years to be able to have Hakim as my guest. Whenever I go to Egypt, I'm treated like a son. I'm treated like a member of his family with incredible respect. And so it's wonderful to be able to reciprocate and have him here and dote on him and wait on him and have these incredible conversations that we have. Hakim has this amazing ability that I've told people, I've characterized him as a walking library. And it almost seems like it's inexhaustible. The well never ends. So every time we come, we get into, it seems like similar topics, but we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's an example of what we believe is what's happening for people, that consciousness will be awakening now, and we're going to be able to address these subjects that you're so interested in, and be able to go deeper and deeper and deeper as more information is revealed and as our consciousness and senses open.
Now, Stephen, you're a trained Egyptologist, and so that means that you probably had been given one set of lenses, and then you met Hakim. What was the transition like from a traditional mainstream approach into Hakim's core teaching? And how did you make that transition?
Yes, it's an excellent question. And actually, I never was someone who was an accepted Egyptologist. I began the study on my own. I've been trained in archaeology by one of the world's great prehistorians who's probably passed on, Professor Francois Borde at the University of Bordeaux, when I did archaeology in the 70s. He taught me field archaeology. But I came to Egyptology on my own, studied on my own, and very quickly went past academic Egyptology as not being complete, not being enough of the answer. I went into the metaphysical tradition, got involved with the Rosicrucian Order Amark in San Jose, California, went deep into the Masonic, Theosophical, and Rosicrucian traditions about ancient Egypt. But even that seemed like there was still something missing. So as I always say, to make a long story short, I discovered a book by Murray Hope, a British author, Wiccan priestess, and independent Egyptologist, who indicated in this book, it's called Ancient Egypt, A Serious Connection. I discovered it in the early 90s, that there still was a living tradition in Egypt. There still were people who kept the oral tradition, the old ways, way beyond before writing, before Egyptology recognized it, that there was a civilization. And so I went to Egypt actively seeking someone, and lo and behold, as you said, Hakim has been an active tour guide. He's basically semi-retired now, but still leads groups. I lead groups to Egypt, and Hakim works with our groups. And he's been doing this for 58 years. I mean, he's been living in the shadow. His village, Nazrat Esseman, is the village right by the Giza Plateau. From Hakim's balcony window, you look right at the Sphinx, looking at you. He's grown up here. Over 70 years, he's been investigating the traditions of his own country, his own people, besides the formal academic training of Egyptology and archaeology. So when I met him, I knew he was the teacher I was always looking for. And the collaboration has just continued for going on 14 years, and we're working on a third book. And it's just been an amazing experience to understand this whole tradition that's way before there was a Greco-Roman Western understanding of the country that's, as we say, erroneously labeled Egypt, Egyptos, Greek word. It's Kemet, and that's the ancient civilization, which we can trace back 65,000 years at least, the beginning of this current cycle, but cycles which may take it back to ages, to dates that no one wants to deal with, millions of years perhaps.
Hakim, you're in your 70s, your late 70s. You have 11 children. Congratulations. I've met a couple of your sons. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to meet you the last time I was in Egypt. When did you, as an individual, as an Egyptian man, as a man born in Egypt, when did you discover ancient Kemet, and how did that awakening change your life?
In the family, there are uncle. God bless his soul. He's passed now. Uncle is a brother to my mother. And you know, we have after a windy day, this uncle encourages children of the family to go after a windy day and look for artifacts laying on the ground. Mm-hmm. I was one of these kids, as you call them here in America, and to go and bring things back and give it to him, and he give a reward like a silver coin to buy a certain candy or something like that. I was one of those kids, and failure, that's what my mother said. I come back always with empty hands. And I spend all the time staring on the walls to know what's there, what is this? The writing, which is we call it hieroglyphics, you know. So I was captured by the writings and drawings on the walls, and I keep walking from one wall into another, and until the sun goes, and I have to return back home with empty hands. Yeah, and that's how I was involved in this. Even after the high school, I have chosen the archaeology college in Cairo University. It's called Fuad University. Fuad is the name of the father of King Pharaoh. But after the revolution, they turned it into Fuad. They turned it from Fuad into Cairo University. And that's how I'm involved with the archaeology. And it's taking me deeper and deeper. I want to know. Plus the stories I heard from the mama about life and what will be seen and things like that. Like, you know, bedtime stories. That's how I evolved in this.
And so the idea is then also spending many, many years searching the elders of all the different tribes and hearing the stories that have been passed down the oral tradition long before there was writing. And that's how he got exposed to Kemet.
And that's kind of the romantic image that's really not an image, it's a reality to me. When you're walking in Hakim's village, you're searching the eyes of everybody that you pass because you're looking for those that know. You know that some look at the monuments, they look at the temples, they look at the ancient past and really don't have a lot of interest in it, but you know that passed from person to person to person is the truth that will open the door to the ancient past. Stephen, for you, was there a moment when you made that discovery of Kemet, when that door opened and it suddenly changed your view, and you knew you could not go back to relating to the story that mainstream archaeology or Egyptology is presenting about what happened in that country?
Well, as I say, I've been heading in that direction. I had rejected the academic approach. I even found the metaphysical approach lacking. So I was looking for more. I was looking for someone who may have known a deeper answer. And that happened the first day I was in Egypt. When I went to Egypt first in 1992, I was going with a group that was using Hakim as the tour guide. So the first day I'm there standing in front of the Sphinx is Hakim. And I've always had a very deep personal connection to the Sphinx, still do. It's actually the Sphinx that led me to this whole journey and led me to him. And I looked at the Sphinx and I looked at him, and she said to me, "This is the man you've been looking for. This is the teacher." And just hearing him speak, just hearing him mention things that casually say the Sphinx is 54,000 years old, casually talking about the fact that we're talking about a matriarchy. Descent was from mother to daughter. There were no male king pharaohs. There were no male kings. We can go into detail about this. He kept throwing things out there like this, and with the authority in which he spoke, I said, this man knows something. I have to speak to this man. So I pulled him to the side, and we got into conversation, and sure enough, very quickly, early in the conversation, he starts bringing out the whole idea of the previous civilization and cycles, and that led into this whole idea of Kemet and what became the research that resulted in the land of Osiris. The whole new foundation, new discipline, as you've mentioned. We don't teach Egyptology. We teach Kemetology.
And the story, the truth resonates. I mean, it is there, and we know that there is so much more to this picture than we've ever been taught or has been revealed.
And as you said, William, to follow it up, as you go in the village, you look in their eyes, you're looking for somebody who knows, but they're looking back at you. And the people that Hakim calls the keepers, those are the guardians of the different sites. They look at you operating with more senses than we have, and they know someone that they can talk to. So they usually pick people like you and I, William, who are there with clear heart, honest intent, with integrity to want to know these things, and they'll say, "Come here, come with me, I'll show you something." The normal reaction, because that's how Westerners are trained, think, "Oh, this somebody just wants some bakshish, wants to get some money from me." No, they know it's in your heart, they know what you're seeking, and they will continually show you things that other tourists, maybe Egyptologists, have not seen. Hakim knew that to me as soon as we met. So as we know, every time I go to Egypt, he shows me something new, teaches me something new. I mean, there are so many places to go that people can understand, they can see ancient Kemet for themselves.
Yeah, every time you go to Egypt, it's a different place. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back.
Here's William Henry with a very special offer for you.
Along with every copy of The Illuminator, I'm including a free copy of my Stairway to Heaven DVD. That's a $19.95 value, absolutely free.
And Stairway to Heaven is a beautifully produced DVD about the suppressed secrets of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and the Stairway to Heaven. Go beyond all the hype and hokum to the real secret, and wow, it's free.
Who was and is the Illuminator, and how can you bring this powerful energy into your own life? These were the questions that inspired my new book. The astonishing facts about the secret teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene and their connection to the illumined ones of the past are discussed. Other subjects include the alchemical secrets of Mary Magdalene's anointing oil and the reality of an extraterrestrial presence in the Gnostic texts about Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
So here's the deal. Both The Illuminator and Stairway to Heaven, just $23.95. And remember, if you're a subscriber to UnknownCountry.com, you get an additional 10% off. Offer good only while supplies last. So go to the UnknownCountry.com store right now and get illuminated.
This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Hakim and with Stephen Mailer. Stephen, just before the break, we were talking about how each time you go to Egypt, it's a different place. It's a different experience because there's so much to see and so much to experience. What I want to talk about for the moment here is the core teaching. The distinction between Kemet in Egypt is at the very core of the truth for Hakim and those who share his vision about what the land of the Nile was and in fact still is. Kemet is an indigenous African word that peoples living along the river may have used before writing was first invented. Let's take us back to ancient times, to ancient Kemet, and just talk for a moment about this civilization, where it came from, what its people were like.
The word Kemet translated into your English today as Black Land.
The Black Land.
Black Land. And obviously, black comes with the flood. When it rains a lot in the south, the water stored in two famous lakes, the Tana Lake and Victoria Lake. But Tana were, the white and blue rivers joined together in a place called Gabal Lawli in Sudan, and till it reached the Mediterranean, where the northern borders. So when the flood comes with the water loaded with silt, and silt lays on the light color sand of the desert, turns into black. So they call it the Black Land. That's where the word Kemet is. But Egypt is another thing. 700 years before Christ, there is a Persian who comes to Egypt, would like to put offerings to Ptah, P-T-A-H, that's the local god of Memphis, Ptah Neferton, that's Riyadh, and on a stela written on it in Phoenician letters, which is the Greek called hieroglyphics, I have come to the place of the energy of God. And that's pronounced, when you read it, Het Ka Ptah. Het means the place, Ka is the image, Ptah is the title to the God who parts from the blue. And that is, when it's written in Greek letters, turned into He Ge Tos. He Gestos, and that's where the word Egypt comes from. And that's only 600 years old, 600 to 700 years before Christ.
So suddenly we have a shift away from what can be thought of as the truth. We have a new name for the country. It's suddenly Egypt is born, and Kemet is not necessarily, it just goes into a dormant phase, let's say. But what we have is the true evidence of this civilization spread throughout the Nile, especially, Stephen, in the form of the energy centers, the per-netters. Let's talk about the Kemetian science of energy and the sacred sites of the Nile as powerhouses and the technology that built the Giza monuments.
Yes, and the powerhouse is actually a good term. It's one that Hakim likes to use. One of the bases of his teachings, the foundations, is cycle, and it involves use of certain numbers, the number 5 and the number 42. Originally, Kemet was composed of 42 tribes. That's the basis of the 42, all races of people. As Hakim says, from all major continents, from Europe, from Asia, Africa, combined in Kemet, 42 tribes, all races. Then there's the number 5. 5 appears in the 5 stages of the sun. It also is what we call 5 pers. Per meaning house. First, per-ah, origin of the word pharaoh, really means high house. And it's the woman's house. The key understanding here is a matriarchy, matrilineal descent. There never was a male pharaoh. Absolutely not. Male per-ah. Never. So they're not kings. These are people that are just male representatives of a family chosen by the per-ah, who is the woman. Second is per-ka. That's your tomb, the house of the ka. Per-ba, house ba can be defined as spirit, house of the spirit, that's your temple. Now the one that you want to lead to is per-neter. Now, neter is the key understanding. Neter has been one of the words most mistranslated by those who think they know. They've translated it as God or goddess. No. Neter, defined by Schwaller de Lubitsch first to bring it to the West, said it's an aspect of consciousness, a principle of creation. Hakim further defines it as a sense, which is an aspect of consciousness. Again, saying we are innately born with 360 senses. So we believe now it's actually 180 degrees one way, meaning there was 180 masculine concepts and 180 feminine concepts, which makes 360. So everything had a duality, but they're principles. So per neter, Greeks used it to mean the word nature. House of nature, house of energy, powerhouse. It's not pyramid. They defined it as pyramid, but the Greek word pyramidos, where it comes from, means fire in the middle. Even that has no relationship to a tomb. It may be describing a machine in the Greek understanding. But we know that the Greeks did not understand what it was all about. They, from Mr. Herodotus, as Hakim likes to say, the journalist, called the father of history, sometimes called the father of lies, he was told that the whole civilization was kings and their sons, and the kings are buried in pyramids, their tombs. Absolute rubbish. Nonsense. These per neters, which we call pyramids today, stone masonry pyramids made of limestone, basalt, and granite, igneous rock, powerful crystalline content, were for energy. They are powerhouses, produce varied. We could sit and have a whole conversation of what different types of energy was produced. We don't even know all of them yet, but we know microwaves, radio waves, hydrogen gas, perhaps electricity, tremendous and even sub-quantum fields. We have a physicist in Ukraine working on the theory that those that built the Great Pyramid had a greater knowledge of quantum physics than we have today. He thinks he has a device that can measure that the Great Pyramid pulses quantum waves, which shows an incredible degree of understanding. And so these were energy houses. They were arranged on the natural grid line of the Earth herself, power places in a line, in a grid, to produce these tremendous infrasound and energy waves throughout, and what we say, free energy. Chris Dunn and I make a joke these days, and we say, whoever built the Great Pyramid was a bunch of Nikola Tesla. It is a major free energy device.
And so what we had at this time, as many as 40, 50,000 years ago, I think you're probably comfortable with that time frame, is we had energy centers built by a bunch of Teslas running around, and the purpose of them was to amplify these high energy frequencies. And the effect, I think you talked, that they had on people was that they kept our bodies and our emotions healthy and in a heightened state. So let's talk about what would it be like living in such a civilization where you had this fully functioning system of houses of nature that were continually bathing us in the frequency of life and of healthy emotions.
Now, the word nature here, if you write it down in your letters, it's NTR, just NTR.
NTR.
Have used it? Yeah.
Yes, because vowels were sacred. They were not written.
Yeah, there are no translation for it, even in the Greek. They have no just use that, but the way they say it, they say it's nature, just like that. And this flexible stage you can use for any purpose, like if you see a nice site, like I'm looking at it now in Colorado, that's nature. When you see some good, healthy people, it's nature. If you see, the word nature, you can use it for anything, but the root is from Kim, Commission word for Kim.
And the idea, William, as you said, Hakim introduces this concept of the Sesh, the 42 tribes, known as the people. Yeah. They were not white, black, Jew, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, blah, blah, blah. It was everyone. It's a generic term, man, female, no difference, the Sesh. So the idea, when people ask, why was the Great Pyramid built? Hakim says, for the health, for the good of the Sesh. It's a free energy device for everyone. You don't have to plug in. You don't need wires.
The location of what we call Kemp today is in Africa, Asia, and Europa. You see, that's what I mean by the word Sesh, people of all. And the word Sesh being translated into Greek like human. And that is when you look everything through man point of view. Human. There is a man, M-A-N, and there is another man with womb man. That is the translation to the word sex.
And so the goal, as you said, William, was to maintain healthy sex.
Yeah.
Keep people's immune systems at the highest frequency, their consciousness at the highest, health at the highest, consciousness at the highest, happiness, all of that. That was the major function of the Great Pyramid, to maintain healthy sex.
Did it have a spiritual function as well, Stephen?
Oh, yes.
In other words, did people go to the Great Pyramid to have a spiritual experience? Or was it like going to a modern Corvette and opening the hood and looking at the engine and expecting to have a spiritual experience? Some people do. I don't.
Yes, if I could say it's because we're talking about things that have happened in stages. When the great Perneter was actually functioning, no one was to go inside. The energy would have been too extreme. What they did is build temples nearby. The Perba bathed in the energy field of the Perneter, and people could go in there and chant sounds and continue the high consciousness. But we talk about perhaps a major cataclysmic event happening around 11,500 years ago, so obviously the pyramid has to be older than that actually shut down its function as a major Perneter, and then people could start going inside and start holding initiations in there. So that's why we do that today. I always tell people the greatest meditations I've ever had have been in the King's Chamber. So it's still producing infrasound. It's still vibrating as a coupled oscillator in harmonic frequency to the earth. This is why people have profound spiritual experiences today inside the Great Pyramid. But it has only been used as a temple of initiation for maybe 5,000 years or so. So the original intent was not to go inside. It's producing these tremendous energy fields. But the energy fields, you could have a temple nearby, and there's where you go and could bathe in the fields. So it's only within the last cycle, perhaps, that people have been using it to go inside and have initiation.
When we get back, I want to talk about when we get back from the break, I want to talk about the Egyptian concepts of death and rebirth. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Hakeem and with Stephen Mailer. Gentlemen, one of the topics that I've been interested in lately is the Egyptian ideas of death and rebirth. This is sparked by the Egyptian Quest for Immortality exhibit that's here in Nashville this summer. So I've had a chance to go look at the recreation of the tomb of Tutmosis III about a dozen times. It's a phenomenal experience to be able to study that close up, and it's led me to wondering about the whole idea of the ancient Egyptians' belief in the afterlife. I know that part of what Hakeem and Stephen you write about is this idea that after the time of Akhenaten you had a shift in their beliefs and changes. But what I'm wondering is, when the ancient Egyptians said they went to the West to be reborn, did they literally have to go to the West in order to die, or is it important to live, die, to be reborn in Egypt?
We have a group of people, we call them the Hanut, the untouchable people, those who deal with the dead. And we have no word of death in the Keynesian language. When we want to say this word, we say westing, or heading to the west, just like the sun. But this become a great business to the Hanut. When you promise paradise and to the other side, if you do this and that and that, this is only exists in the time of the Ammonite state. And Steve can tell you about.
Yes. Again, basically, this is what From Light into Darkness, the second book, is about, how religion evolved. The whole idea is the ancient Cometians did not believe in death. Simple as that. They did not see a dichotomy, life and death. Everything was life. What we call death, they called resting, is just changing to form. So no, they didn't actually think they had to go physically to the West. They believed that's where spirit went when and just to go on to another form. In other words, they always had this concept that there's a part of us that's never been created, can never be destroyed. People sometimes want to call it the soul or whatever, or spirit. But they believe that the essence that we are is never created, never destroyed. So death was not an end to them. It was just form changing. So the physical body was not, they knew they were more than the physical body. When the physical body was dropped, they knew that there was essence that continued on. The Hanuti that Hakeem is talking about, these are the people who took these ideas and made a business out of it, created the idea of death, soul, and God, and created religion and an afterlife. But to the Cometians, there was no, afterlife and this life are all the same. It's all one continuum, one flow of consciousness. And so it didn't separate. Again, the concept of separation comes in with this modern cycle of Amun. And that's where religion comes in. So we're talking about spirituality that existed before then. And in spirituality, there was just an understanding that we are spirit, never created, never destroyed. And all it is, what later became death, was just form changing, going to the West. And they didn't separate life and death. It all was a continuum of life.
And for Dreamland subscribers, we have an astonishing conversation between myself and Hakeem and Stephen, and as well as our special guest, Greg Braden, on the subject of separation and high spirituality. It's a conversation not to be missed. One of the topics that I find so fascinating in the work that you two are doing involves the Comitian writing. We know that they were never called hieroglyphs, but instead they were called by the Comitians something else. They called their speech and writing Suf, which is the root word for our Sophia. Can we talk about this for a moment? What is the origin then of these teachings? Because this is important to me, because this is what Hakeem is saying originally got him going on this path to find these secrets of ancient Kemet.
You know, we have students come from everywhere to study. Particularly, the one come from the nearest continent, that's Europa. We have them to come and study the written language. And the written language to the Greeks pronounced hierographia, hieroglyphic. Hiero means holy, glyphic or graphia is the writing, the holy writing. And when they go back, they know about it, so they are titled as the children of the Suf. The children of the Suf language, the children of the Suf language written. And that's how it's pronounced. Phileo Suf.
Philosophy.
Yeah, break down into philosophy now. Philosophy. Phileo Suf.
And so how did one then connect with or receive the wisdom, the philosophy of the Holy Suf?
How connected?
Mm-hmm. How did one receive that wisdom? How did they learn the knowledge of the Holy Suf?
Well, the symbols, there is no language written, but it's the symbols all. And those who want to add more to make the pronunciation easier, this is what we call the other symbols added to the original symbol. If you have a symbol for Nefer, for example, you have like an axe or a flag. And when you have a symbol for disk of the sun, just a circle with the beam of the sun coming out. And that's how the symbol. If I write anybody's name, like William, now William can be titled to a piece of land, or a machine, or an old man, or a woman, or a child. These are the symbols also added to the letters which is pronounced the word itself. You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Stephen, one of the subject that seems to come up a lot over and over again in your work with Hakeem is the subject of water.
Yes.
Talk with us for a moment about the ancient Comitian belief or understanding of water. What did they know that we aren't fully understanding of today, or what are we trying to discover about their secrets today?
Yes. Let me take you to the symbol of water. It doesn't come to my mind, but here it is now. You see a leg with the foot of a human, a foot and leg to the knee, and then on the knee sits or lays a vase of water running down to the toes. That is a symbol of saying the man or the person who deals with the water, the one who knows water. And that's pronounced where.
And the symbol is Asgat.
Yeah, the symbol is Asgat. As is the water.
And as Hakeem teaches us, this is an extraordinary, to understand, to work with water means many different professions.
Yeah.
Again, their knowledge and use of water, we're just rediscovering today. We say to people water was a basic source of the energy for the Great Pyramid. They actually catalytically converted water into oxygen and hydrogen and used the hydrogen gas. But water was used for so many different things, not just to irrigate crops, not just to drink for health. It was used for energy, for many, many different facets. This is why they tunneled hundreds of miles, I believe, but at least definitely 25 square miles of underground tunnels to connect with underground river running water to bring to the sites where the pyramids were to use the water for energy. And tremendous hydraulic engineering projects to drill through limestone bedrock, and this is what most of the tunnels are. They're for water to come to the houses of energy, the powerhouses, and And just to start, we know the Great Pyramid produced microwaves, radio waves, probably electricity, hydrogen gas, quantum waves, but there's more. I've told people it will take lifetimes before we even can discern how many different types of energy were produced from the Great Pyramid. And the key understanding, Hakim has told me, is running water, a beam of the sun, using solar energy to hit the water with crystal energy, with sound. All of that interplay, interaction is how they cut, shape, lifted stone into place. And the water was a tremendous source of energy for the people.
And I wonder if there was a wisdom attached with it too, Stephen. Here's why I'm asking. In the book of John, Jesus meets up with a blind man who is blind from birth. And Jesus spits on the ground and makes a clay with his saliva and smears the clay on the man's eyes and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, or Shalom, the pool of peace. So the man went and washed and came back, and he was able to see. Now, in the book, The Wars of the Jews, Flavius Josephus, who's, of course, a Jewish priest, tells us that the location of Shalom had that fountain of sweet and abundant water. And what I'm wondering is this. Is it possible that Jesus did more than cure a man of literal blindness? Could we also be talking about a spiritual blindness? And when the man could see, he could see the language and the symbols of wisdom. He became a suf, or an initiated being. What are your thoughts on that possibility?
I agree to that. But the water has everything. Everything we need is in water.
I would agree that, the whole idea of baptism comes from ancient Kemet. So definitely there was rituals of doing ceremony, prayers, sacred chanting, immersing somebody in water for a spiritual rebirth. Obviously, Christianity borrowed everything from previous systems, and we know that there was what we could call baptism in ancient Kemet, part of initiation. So I definitely that's what Jesus was doing. And also people believe that a master through saliva can transmit energy and wisdom. So I think that's also part of what was the situation there.
And so what I'm wondering
it's a spiritual rebirth, obviously.
Yeah, and he could have been preparing a person to go bathe in the quantum waves coming off the Great Pyramid.
Sure.
Something like that.
Sure.
And every pirba, or as we call it, the temple to Koti,
yes,
you have a holy lake.
Right.
This holy lake is supposed to be for the baptism or another initiation, to be prepared spiritually to be in the spot area where the Holy of Holies, what we call today, where the source of energy is. But there is another reason kept not to be announced, is the purpose of numbers, like the Hanut watch how high the Nile flood, because it goes with the Nile. How high the Nile flood, how much land is irrigated, and how much harvest is expected. That is one of the Holy Lake functions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's water. The Holy Lake is water from the Nile.
William, to answer your question, water was considered very sacred to the ancient community.
When we come back from the break, gentlemen, I want to talk about the subject of light beings. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Stephen Mailer and his teacher, Hakim. Gentlemen, I'm highly, highly intrigued by the recollections and rememberings concerning ancient light beings. There's an oral tradition here in Tennessee where I live that was retold by a Cherokee wisdom keeper. Her name is Diane Wehu. She was allowed, after we landed a man on the moon in 1969, to record these ancient traditions in her book, Voices of Our Ancestors. She says that formless thought beings called TLA beings rode a sound wave from the Pleiades star cluster through a hole in space in East Tennessee and created the Cherokee tribe. All humans are dream children of these angels or elemental forces who came from the stars. And I'm wondering, does this legend, this oral tradition of East Tennessee in any way resonate with you in terms of the oral tradition of ancient Kemet and the Netter beings and the possibility that ancient Kemet was visited once long ago by similar beings?
Yes. If I take you to a place called Abu Jarab. Abu Jarab is located in a place called Abu Sir, where Boo Wizard, Saddam. And it's symbolizing ruins of, and all this obelisk, that's what the Greeks call the ray of the sun as obelisk. All this obelisk has been constructed in this area. Close by, Dr. Emery or others found landing posts. Landing discs were found in this area. And that is evidence that we have visited from the blue. Anything but from the blue symbolized with a bird. And Ptah is a human head and body of a bird, wearing a cape with a vulture bird.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as Jehuti, he is also from the blue. And all these come with wisdom and teaching, symbols and others. But the other thought, which is, I have been in a conference in Nevada, Laughlin, Nevada, speaking about UFOs. And most of the speeches I heard is based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what is the aliens and Anunnakis and all this is based on fear. It doesn't exist, in my opinion.
So when you're talking about Abu Jarab as an ancient landing site, and you're describing Ptah, I've got a statue of Ptah on my desk right here where he has his tight-fitting blue skull cap. He has his bird feather costume on. It's very tight-fitting. He holds his Uaz, Ankh, and Key of Life scepter in his hand. Are we describing with Ptah an actual being who came from out of the blue, as in he...
The
Go
word
ahead.
Ptah in Phoenician language means the thing. P-H-I-N-G.
A thing.
The thing, yeah. The word is still used up to this moment, up to now, in my country, where I come from, I mean.
Stephen, you've been doing some very interesting research on the color blue as relates to Ptah, possibly. Are you willing to share with us some of that you've been working on and any of the latest results?
Yes, I can. We're actually going to have an article out soon, probably in World Explorer magazine, maybe at Atlantis Rising. One of the sidebars, one of the assignments Hakeem gave me way back in 1997 was to look at some of the artifacts and say that no one knows the source of the ancient Cometian blue, the blue dye, blue pigment that was used. He said it's not copper, not cobalt, not lapis. Most of the dye we know we used in dynastic times, like blue faience, was full of copper. So we gathered some samples, and I kept these samples for many years, hoping to eventually get to someone who could do this. And to make a long story short, we have a gentleman on the advisory board of the organization I'm involved with, the Great Pyramid of Giza Research Association. If people are interested, it's one word, GizaPyramid.com. This gentleman runs a laboratory in Pittsburgh. He has access to X-ray spectroscopy, advanced scanning electron microscope. So we sent these samples and they tested it. They found the control samples that we had from the dynastic period clearly were full of copper. But we had gathered a sample, a potsherd, on the Giza Plateau, and Hakeem had spotted and pointed to me and said, Stephen, there's an example of the ancient blue. Well, they've tested this. We know what the chemicals are. We know what the composition is, but these top chemists sent it to another lab. To make a long story short, they don't know what makes it blue. They know it's barium sulfate, barium crystals, but some chemical process is involved here that makes it blue. Aha, what does that mean? Well, where does the word alchemy come from? Yeah. One of the Arabic terms for Egypt today is al-Chem, the land of Chem. That's where alchemy is. So here is an example of ancient alchemy. We have the material. We have it tested. We know what the chemicals are. We don't know how the chemicals work together to make it blue, but the Cometians obviously did. So here's a living example. We're going to write it up, put an article out of ancient alchemy. The chemists today don't know what makes it blue.
Is this blue similar to the famous Chartres stained glass blue?
Perhaps. I don't know. I mean, we know that some of these ideas may have been adopted to the Greeks. The Romans did have some knowledge of dyes and materials that they got from Egypt. We don't know. But it's definitely, if you remember going into some of the temples, if you saw the depictions of Nut on the ceiling with the blue sky behind it, because she represents the sky. That's the blue. You see it a lot in Kemet, in the temples, the ancient blue dye pigment. And Egyptologists just assume it's copper. They've never tested it. It's not copper.
Hmm. So, are you willing to go out on a limb then to say that this is an alchemical product that we're talking about, and that possibly it's somehow connected with beings who came from the stars, i.e. Ptah?
I've speculated that, William. I've gone there because, again, Hakim says that the correct definition of Ptah is the one who comes from the blue through the waters from the stars. And so it is intimating that perhaps the blue has an extraterrestrial source, possibly, or extraterrestrial understanding how to make it blue, these chemicals which are found on the Earth. So I speculate that's a possibility, William.
And I'm so interested in this whole idea of these beings manifesting literally out of the blue. And I can't point to another Comitian or even Egyptian site that is similar to Abu Ghraib in terms of its significance or its labeling as a place where this actually happened. Are there other places that we know of, whether through myth, legend, or story, that says this was a quote-unquote landing place of these beings?
Only Abu Ghraib.
Only Abu Ghraib.
Yes.
That's why you went there, William. It told you
That's
there.
what. Yeah, I went 3 times. I had to go back again and again because it's so remarkable when you're standing in front of that mound there, and you've got this enormous alabaster platform sitting there. It represents to me such a tremendous enigma, and you know deep in your soul that you are in an incredibly ancient and incredibly special place.
Absolutely. That's a very, this is what I told you when we spoke when you first came back. Your senses were opened. You've got the insight. I have that too. I have that ability. Hakim will take me to an area and you just sense the unbelievable antiquity. I had the same exact experience the first time I went to Abu Ghraib. Whatever I could say about it, I couldn't articulate, but I knew in my being that this was very, very ancient site.
And talking now... Yes.
I would like to add here that the word alabaster, it's an Italian word. It doesn't mean anything, but Italians want to describe translucent marble. That's what they call alabaster. But these stones you see in Abu Ghraib, it's a crystal, and nothing but crystal. Yeah, African crystal.
A massive slab of African crystal. Absolutely remarkable. We've only got a few minutes left, gentlemen, and one thing I wanted to talk about is reincarnation. So many times you see examples. For example, there's a physicist named Brian Greene who shows in his book The Elegant Universe that a symbol representing the tearing of space-time. And then you go back and you look at the Egyptian hieroglyph to tear, and it's the exact same symbol. You look at images, as I've documented in my presentations, of the ark or bark of the millions of years, the ship of the gods, and you compare the shape of that ship of the gods with the way, for example, Professor Stephen Hawking portrays a wormhole or a stargate. And it makes you wonder if these physicists, these scientists are maybe reincarnated Comitians, if they're tapping into what is the original sacred science of the netter beings. What exactly would you say is going on in our world? Another example, of course, is Dr. Emoto in his book, The Hidden Messages from Water, who is providing a scientific collaboration of exactly what Hakim is saying about water. Exactly. Are we seeing a return to full consciousness, or are we seeing a reappearance of ancient Comitian priests and teachers?
It's the awakening.
It's the awakening.
Yes.
Again, it's the end of the cycle. Senses are opening up.
And I think we're just at the very beginning of this, and this is what makes it so incredibly exciting, because just in the past 10 years, it seems that this awakening has begun. Where are we going to be just in a couple of years from now? I mean, everything is accelerating so quickly. It just seems that we're so close, right on the brink of gathering these secrets. What I wondered, I don't want to take this into a paranoid direction, but if these priests are awakening and these scientists are awakening, do we also have the Hanuti awakening as well? And are we looking at a major confrontation coming up? Have some of these secrets been discovered and are now being militarized and will be used against us? What are your thoughts on that? Do we have guidance coming from outside the planet that assures our awakening, or is this something that we're going to have to fight for?
Awakening is awakening the whole senses, and then we turn into a healthy test. Now, the Hanuti here, it's a system only work on the dark. Their job is only in the dark. They feed the fear.
Right.
They feed this fear, and this is with terror, anyhow. To terror and to pay more. If you are more afraid, you pay more to the Hanuti. And that's what it is.
So the more afraid you are, the more you pay the Hanuti.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
You've used the word as reincarnation. No. What the Hanutis in Egypt aiming the resurrection, because they have the sun as evidence to be resurrected every cycle of our planet, 24 hours. But reincarnation, goes into places, it doesn't fit the story of resurrection. Because the moist, you cannot bury a body and say it will be raised or to be up again, because it's moist and it will be stinky. That's where the phrase of reincarnation is. It's another hope for a new cycle.
New body.
A new body.
Mm.
Yeah, but what based on is the resurrection. The sun sits and rises up again. And this will happen in every 24 hours as our cycle timing or time lineage. But our planet also cycles in another way, what you call the other way. It's 26,000 years, one cycle.
Could it be session, yeah.
Could it be session?
Stephen, how
so
can...
what we're saying, William, to answer your question is we're not anticipating this great battle between light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing is, it's always darkest before the dawn. This is what the world we're in today, with the preponderance of ignorance and trying to keep the truth hidden. But as people come into consciousness, as people wake up, once the fear is lessened, they have no more control. So they're not going to be this battle because their influence will just disappear. It seems like people think, this is too serendipitous type thinking, that people are just going to eventually turn their spears into plowshares. But this is what has always been predicted. Once the consciousness hits a certain point, the Hanuti will lose their influence. The light comes in and dissipates the darkness, and we'll be in the highest state of consciousness without having to fight a battle over it. A battle is still Amen. A battle is still the Hanuti's way of dealing with things.
Gotcha. So let's hope we're at the tipping point. Stephen, how can individuals, our listeners, keep in touch with Hakeem and his activities and
thank you.
Learn about your trips and tours?
Yes, I lead tours to Egypt. I'm leading one in November. The site is, again, www.bodymindspiritjourneys.com. People click on Sacred Journeys, they'll see Egypt. Anytime people come with me to Egypt, they meet with Hakeem. He does work with our groups. He answers questions. They can get to share their experiences with him and learn the Commission teachings. We're leading a very special tour to Egypt next March that Hakeem will be leading with us. That's for people who've already been to Egypt. We're going to go again, like you've been fortunate to go to Abu Ghraib. Tourists don't go to Abu Ghraib. We're going to take our group there. We're going to go to Amarna, the city of light of Akhenaten. And so people contact me. They can get arrangements to meet Hakeem in Egypt, to be with Hakeem, and go on tour with me. They get to experience Hakeem's teachings in the field.
Well, Hakeem, I want to thank you very much for an amazingly fulfilling conversation. I know our listeners appreciate it as well, and we'll look forward to meeting you in the future.
I thank you, William, for having me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, Stephen, very much.
This is
William Henry. Mm-hmm. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. Next up, Linda Moulton Howe.
You're about to experience something that you just can't get elsewhere. Emmy Award-winning science reporter Linda Moulton Howe reporting on the absolute leading edge of science, discovery, and the true mysteries of the unknown. Don't miss her website, earthfiles.com, the one science website that tells you the secrets and gives you the facts the others dare not. earthfiles.com. This week, she has Ryan Wood with her live, talking about documents suggesting something very new and very extraordinary about an unknown part of Area 51. Here she is with Ryan Wood, Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Whitley. I'm in Colorado now, where I'll be speaking at the MUFON conference this weekend, along with Ryan Wood. My subject is going to be UFO crash retrievals and the American government policy of denial in the interest of national security. And the subject with Ryan goes perhaps to the heart of the question of back engineering technology that might have been retrieved from one or more non-human interplanetary disks going all the way back to 1941. And this mystery is called Area 29. Now, Ryan oversees the website majesticdocuments.com, which contains many leaked documents from a man named Timothy Cooper and other sources about U.S. government knowledge of extraterrestrial biological entities, a phrase used in these leaked documents, their advanced technologies, and the government's strict policy of denial about all of it in the interest of national security. One file that Ryan received contained photographs of unidentified hardware and people related to UFO back engineering. And one of those photographs was a map of White Sands Missile Range with the Trinity Site region highlighted in black ink and labeled Area 29. For more than a year, Ryan Wood has been investigating the mystery of what Area 29 does. In the process, he has learned that north of Oscura Peak, which is right above this region of the Trinity Site where the bomb was dropped in the atomic test of 1945, and inside the boundaries of Area 29 is a United States Air Force research laboratory which develops advanced missile tracking, laser, and particle beam weapons. Oscura Peak is also referenced in some of the Majestic 12 documents as a geographical reference for at least one, quote, interplanetary, unquote, crash site. And now, with Ryan live here with me in Colorado, I'd like him to begin with what I think is one of the more fascinating research investigations going on right now, and that is, what happened? How did he come to know about this Area 29, which is the Trinity Site at White Sands Missile Range? Ryan.
Thank you, Linda. I first learned about Area 29 when I received a large collection of photographs, probably some 50 photographs with black felt markings, some identifying MJ-12 people, some identifying groups of them and back channels. But some are sort of pictures of crash wreckage, some are pictures of documents and things like that. But on one of them was this label in the upper corner, Area 29, identifying the White Sands Missile Range in the sort of northwestern corner of the missile range. And that caught my attention, and I started to dig around and do some investigation in it, and I've learned a few things about that area. Here's Linda.
Well, one of the things that really impressed me as I have looked at some of these photos that Ryan has here on the desk is one that appeared to have been taken from a satellite. And Ryan, I think it's probably as much a provocative issue about what this Area 29 might be. Describe that satellite image.
Well, let's see. We have one satellite image that was just taken, normal. You can go to Global Explorer today and pull it up, and you see a line of some 27 semi-tractor trailer trucks weaving around on the White Sands Missile Range and going directly into the side of a hill, into an underground facility. Either they're all leaving with dirt or coming in with supplies or going back and forth. But it's a severe, large military convoy that goes in and out of an underground facility. And I'm sure that the White Sands Missile Range is littered with all sorts of underground facilities, and it's logical to believe that anything really important is underground, and ET reverse engineering would be underground.
This whole field of the military having knowledge about a possible extraterrestrial presence and having the most famous Area 51 that's been linked now to the issue of government cover-up of an extraterrestrial presence. For the radio audience that might not understand, we think of Area 51 and we think of the movies and the features and all the documents that have been released about extraterrestrial linked investigations and cover-up. Does Area 51 and Area 29, do they have any kind of official or unofficial connection?
Well, that's a great question, Linda. The unofficial connection is that Area 51 has been linked with extraterrestrials, and Area 29, through this one leaked person, has linked it to extraterrestrials. But when you step back in terms of military jargon, it's a very common way of labeling operations areas, and they used it during World War II and the Korean War and many other military operations, probably today in Iraq. You know, they divide up the area, the whole country in grids, and they call them Area 1 through, 50 or something. It's sort of a convenient way to do it. I've seen examples of this in the National Archives. There's nothing magic about the naming Area 29, but it just seems like we have evidence now that says Area 29 on White Sands is a hotbed of Majestic 12 activity and ET activity. Some of my assets have linked it to deep space propulsion vehicles, ground-to-space aircraft, sort of Mach 10-plus vehicles, negative gravity vehicles, high-energy output devices, laser, particle, beam weapons, so forth. And we know that there is a large research and development lab run by the Air Force right there on Oscuro Peak, dealing with laser beams and particle weapons. So it is a very technologically sound and rich area and a highly classified area, and it's been a military base for a long time. I don't remember the first time, but I'm sure it's a pre-World War II base.
Another interesting thing about this is that as Ryan has done research, he came upon a fascinating book. It is a 2005 copyright by an author named William M. Arkin. And the title of the book is Code Names, Deciphering U.S. Military Plans, Programs, and Operations in the 9/11 World, meaning after 9/11. Now, I am seeing the book for the first time. It is an amazing reference book. Really, it is going through all, thousands, literally, of projects. Now, here is Ryan to talk about one that has been linked to Area 29, knowing that if the audience could see, I am looking at a microfilm photograph of a map of White Sands taken from a microfilm reader. And whoever it was who leaked these photographs and these files to Bob and Ryan Wood wanted them to see black ink on top of this map outlining Area 29, labeling it as Area 29, and with these photographs, this map from a microfilm reader, were photographs of people in which also inked was MJ12 over the people. Ryan is doing an investigation there. Well, now in this book, Code Names, up comes another one with a fascinating link to what his remote viewer has found that Area 29 might be all about. Ryan.
Yeah, the key code word is Omega. Top secret Omega or Omega operations. And in the codename book, they clearly state that Omega is an Air Force special access program. And for those people that are familiar with military security, that means it's a top secret, MAGIC or MJ-12 or Omega classification. It's highly sensitive and secret, and I believe that is the key code word that describes much of the reverse engineering and encrypted long-range communications that is going on with our government and the UFO and ET materials. So that's the umbrella, which I'm sure they won't change the code name for quite some time. I mean, it'll probably cost them a lot of money to change it. But that's the umbrella with which our government is using some of their most advanced research materials and ET craft to further their control of the world.
And it is, to me, as an investigative reporter who has been trying to get to the bottom of what our government knows about an extraterrestrial presence and its agendas, it's fascinating that before he died, Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso in the United States Army told me in great detail about his being at the Trinity site, which is basically at the heart of Area 29, an area that has been possibly one of the most classified areas in this entire United States for decades, and that he had a face-to-face with what Colonel Corso called a non-human entity. And he said that it was all telepathic, that he was shocked by it, but that he remembered that telepathically put in a U.S. Army colonel's mind out there working officially for the government on projects related to back engineering of extraterrestrial technology, that the telepathic thought was, a new world is coming if you can handle it. Well, today, in 2006, with the world as rocky as it is, White Sands Missile Range may still be, in the United States of America context, one of the most important technological developing areas perhaps in the world, and yet, Whitley, it may all be underground, that these 27 trucks photographed from a satellite were only an insight to the fact that this 60 years and long running facility that was so important to the development of the V-2 rocket missiles and up to the present day may actually be dealing with what are called Mach 10 plus vehicles and going out into deep space. And my question to Ryan and to you, Whitley, and I will go to Ryan first, could we have non-humans allied with us in this underground installation trying to get us into outer space?
Well, Linda, that certainly seems like a logical and reasonable speculation. If you believe all the data and the crashed hardware and the recovered alien bodies, and a couple of them live throughout the trajectory of all the crash retrievals that have been outlined in my book and other works, it's likely that this is the area that they would work with them, and other underground areas. It's just sort of speculation, but I'm excited that we have a starting point to really start digging in. I mean, you can do a lot more work in interviewing local people and more satellite imagery. There are scores of targets that you can see on the overhead, large circles that are maybe a mile across, that are concentric circles with marks in them that are highly unusual. Even the roads, oddly enough, create two interlocking pentagons across the area near the Trinity site. It's just too coincidental to be, non-deliberate.
And many people in the military, Whitley, and I'm curious if you've heard this, both your response to an underground cooperation with something non-human, but it's been said to me that we have sometimes used roads, runways, and other features to create some kind of a pattern or geometry that is recognizable to non-humans. Whitley, have you ever heard that?
I can be very specific about the issue of underground facilities. from personal knowledge. When I lived in upstate New York, I was 30 miles south of Woodstock and about 10 miles south of the Iron Mountain facility at Rosendale, New York, on top of one of the largest iron deposits on the planet. In Woodstock, there was an EG&G Rotron facility, which was largely underground. That this facility, the local residents complained bitterly about the fact that it was receiving truck traffic all night, every night. I went up there, finally, and actually sat on the road and watched this truck traffic one night for about an hour, and a large truck would come up the Route 209, up the highway, and then go into the Rotron facility about every 5 minutes. And this was after midnight. And it was to the point that the local city council was becoming involved because of the rumbling of the trucks was driving people crazy. That said, in my own personal experience, we used to hear drilling under our cabin that had a very bizarre effect on us. You could feel it in your body. It would affect you. And I had an attorney there once. We were discussing some matters regarding the cooperatively maintained road, and this drilling was going on. We could both hear it, and suddenly something about the way he moved caused a vibration to go through his body, and a stream of blood began pouring out of his forehead, shooting like a water pistol out of his forehead. He left, and never to return. Any future meetings we had at his house. We also noted that the visitors who would show up when we had groups of people at the cabin, people would say they smelled like they had come from below, and I saw them more than once emerging out of the ground.
Right. And I wondered if you had anybody in the government, because at times you had connection with people who were trying to get information from you that might have been government themselves, trying to find out. Did you ever have anybody say to you, yes, there is an underground ETUS installation in that Iron Mountain area?
No, I never had anyone say that to me, but I did have quite a few people coming up to the cabin, mostly connected not with the intelligence community, but with the oversight entities in the United States Congress, and they were quite interested in all of this, but no one made a specific search, as I recall. I could be just forgetting this, regarding the underground. I did, though. I looked extensively, and I even found a cave out deep in the woods where I used to go and sit, and I had a few things happen there that suggested that there might be a presence there, but the most obvious thing that happened was they're coming up through the floor of our basement and through the ground, out of the ground in the front yard, seen by some witnesses. So, yeah, they were certainly underground. Whether they were in a base that was in any way connected with the United States under there or not, I don't know.
Well, this Area 29 is fascinating because it's being linked for us by somebody who wants to direct that attention around Area 29 being linked to Majestic 12.
I have a question for Ryan, if I may ask Ryan. Ryan, can you hear me?
And I'm going to pass the phone to
him,
Whitley, right now for your question. And before you ask that question, I'd just like our Dreamland audience to know that Ryan is going to be reporting about more of his work on Area 29 at the 4th UFO Crash Retrieval Conference. It's going to be coming up November 10th to 12th in Las Vegas at the Tuscany Hotel and Suites for people who are interested, because I think that we keep making some inroads with the data and research in these conferences, such as this one that Ryan and his father work on so hard. And for people listening, you can go to www.ufoconference.com for registration and ticket information. I'll be there in November as well, and I really recommend it. And now, Whitley, I'm turning the phone over to Ryan.
Ryan, I have a question for you. We only have 2 minutes left, though, so be very succinct in your answer. I think the listeners would like to know where this material is coming to you from.
Well, the Majestic documents came through a lot of different sources spanning since 1984.
No, I mean the material you're talking about now.
Yeah, I know that. And this particular batch of photographs came from Tim Cooper, and Tim Cooper said they came from Thomas Cantwell, a retired near-death former Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit employee, and on his deathbed said, I need to give these up to you, and I need to feel better, and I've done lots of remorseful things in my life, and that's why he turned them over to Tim, allegedly.
Another story of these guys giving up just enough to satisfy their consciences prior to their deaths. I wonder if it really works in the long run. Ryan Wood, I would like to thank you very much for being with us, and Linda Moulton Howe, to thank you for a fabulous report. This is Dreamland, and we'll be looking at.
But I want to know, plus the stories I heard from the mama about life and what will be seen and things like that, like, big time stories. That's how I evolved in this.
And so the idea is then also spending many, many years searching the elders of all the different tribes and hearing the stories that have been passed down the oral tradition long before there was writing. And that's how he got exposed to Kemet.
And that's kind of the romantic image that's really not an image, it's a reality to me. When you're walking in Hakim's village, you're searching the eyes of everybody that you pass because you're looking for those that know. You know that some look at the monuments, they look at the temples, they look at the ancient past and really don't have a lot of interest in it, but you know that passed from person to person to person is the truth that will open the door to the ancient past. Stephen, for you, was there a moment when you made that discovery of Kemet, when that door opened and it suddenly changed your view, and you knew you could not go back to relating to the story that mainstream archaeology or Egyptology is presenting about what happened in that country?
Well, as I say, I've been heading in that direction. I had rejected the academic approach. I even found the metaphysical approach lacking, so I was looking for more. I was looking for someone who may have known a deeper answer, and that happened the first day I was in Egypt. When I went to Egypt first in 1992, I was going with a group that was using Hakim as the tour guide. So the first day I'm there standing in front of the Sphinx is Hakim, and I've always had a very deep personal connection to the Sphinx, still do. It's actually the Sphinx that led me to this whole journey and led me to him. And I looked at the Sphinx and I looked at him, and she said to me, "This is the man you've been looking for. This is the teacher." And just hearing him speak, just hearing him mention things that casually say the Sphinx is 54,000 years old, casually talking about the fact that we're talking about a matriarchy. Descent was from mother to daughter. There were no male king pharaohs. There were no male kings. We can go into detail about this. He kept throwing things out there like this, and with the authority in which he spoke, I said, this man knows something. I have to speak to this man. So I pulled him to the side, and we got into conversation, and sure enough, very quickly, early in the conversation, he starts bringing out the whole idea of the previous civilization and cycles, and that led into this whole idea of Kemet and what became the research that resulted in the land of Osiris. The whole new foundation, new discipline, as you've mentioned. We don't teach Egyptology. We teach Kemetology.
And the story, the truth resonates. I mean, it is there, and we know that there is so much more to this picture than we've ever been taught or has been revealed.
And as you said, William, to follow it up, as you go in the village, you look in their eyes, you're looking for somebody who knows, but they're looking back at you. And the people that Hakim calls the keepers, those are the guardians of the different sites. They look at you operating with more senses than we have, and they know someone that they can talk to. So they usually pick people like you and I, William, who are there with clear heart, honest intent, with integrity to want to know these things, and they'll say, "Come here, come with me, I'll show you something." The normal reaction, because that's how Westerners are trained, say, "Oh, this somebody just wants some bakshish, wants to get some money from me." No, they know it's in your heart, they know what you're seeking, and they will continually show you things that other tourists, maybe an Egyptologist, have not seen. Hakim knew that to me as soon as we met. So as we know, every time I go to Egypt, he shows me something new, teaches me something new. I mean, there are so many places to go that people can understand, they can see ancient Kemet for themselves.
Yeah. Every time you go to Egypt, it's a different place. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back.
Here's William Henry with a very special offer for you.
Along with every copy of The Illuminator, I'm including a free copy of my Stairway to Heaven DVD. That's a $19.95 value, absolutely free.
And Stairway to Heaven is a beautifully produced DVD about the suppressed secrets of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and the Stairway to Heaven. Go beyond all the hype and hokum to the real secret, and wow, it's free.
Who was and is the Illuminator, and how can you bring this powerful energy into your own life? These were the questions that inspired my new book. The astonishing facts about the secret teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene and their connection to the illumined ones of the past are discussed. Other subjects include the alchemical secrets of Mary Magdalene's anointing oil and the reality of an extraterrestrial presence in the Gnostic texts about Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
So here's the deal. Both The Illuminator and Stairway to Heaven, just $23.95. And remember, if you're a subscriber to UnknownCountry.com, you get an additional 10% off. Offer good only while supplies last. So go to the UnknownCountry.com store right now and get illuminated.
This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with Hakeem and with Stephen Mailer. Stephen, just before the break, we were talking about how each time you go to Egypt, it's a different place. It's a different experience because there's so much to see and so much to experience. What I want to talk about for the moment here is the core teaching. The distinction between Kemet in Egypt is at the very core of the truth.
Hakeem is difficult to understand, and his ability to speak English falls below the standards we usually use for broadcast on Dreamland. However, he visits the United States so very rarely, we felt that it was important for him to get his message across to you. He teaches in the ancient Egyptian tradition as handed down through his family for thousands of years, and he is very well worth listening to, but it's hard. So we apologize for that and have done everything we can, I can assure you, to enhance his voice for the purposes of this broadcast. And now here's William.
Abdel Hakim Awan is a tour guide of sorts. For decades, he's been giving guidance to explorers and spiritual pilgrims at the sacred sites, the energy centers along the Nile in Egypt. Hakim has tapped into an ancient oral tradition of Kemet. The ancient name for this land, as it was known long before the Greeks called it Egypt. A term used to describe Hakim is the word that is still in use for a vanishing breed, the dragoman. This Turkish word for interpreter meant the multilingual high official who stood to the Sultan's right at court and facilitated his communications with ambassadors and heads of state and guided visiting dignitaries to the great show places of the capital and the empire. Thus, a dragoman had the skills of a diplomat, a scholar, a secretary in the classical sense, literally a keeper of secrets, a vizier or a wise man, and an entertainer, all rolled into one subtle but brilliant package. Hakim is a dragoman. Also on the line with us is Stephen Mailer, an author who's been sitting at the front of Hakim's class for well over 10 years. His two books, Land of Osiris and From Darkness into Light, will give you a scribe's eye view of Hakim's vision of ancient Kemet. His revolutionary course in the indigenous wisdom of ancient Egypt at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, is the first such course ever to be taught anywhere, and it's based on Hakim's teachings about ancient Kemetian language and science, culture, and spiritual practice. Hakim and Stephen, welcome to Dreamland.
Thank you, William. William, it's always a pleasure to be on with you.
Truly, thank you so much. Hakim, welcome back to the U.S. I noted that the last time you were here was in 1986 when you were here and became well known as a peace diplomat who made a tour of Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Denver, L.A., and Memphis and other cities. And your message to America then, as it still is now, is simple. The Egyptian people are people of peace, and they love peace. Can we begin by talking about that? What prompted you to return to the U.S. at this very special time?
Well, it's the same purpose. It's love, light, and peace. That's my return to the United States. And
Love, light, and peace.
Love, light, and peace.
So you look right at the Sphinx, looking at you. He's grown up here. Over 70 years he's been investigating the traditions of his own country, his own people, besides the formal academic training of Egyptology and archaeology. So when I met him, I knew he was the teacher I was always looking for. And the collaboration has just continued for going on 14 years, and we're working on a third book. And it's just been an amazing experience to understand this whole tradition that's way before there was a Greco-Roman Western understanding of the country that's, as we say, erroneously labeled Egypt, Egyptos, Greek word. It's Kemet, and that's the ancient civilization, which we can trace back 65,000 years at least, the beginning of this current cycle, but cycle which may take it back to ages, to dates that no one wants to deal with, millions of years perhaps.
Hakim, you're in your 70s, your late 70s. You have 11 children. Congratulations. I've met a couple of your sons. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to meet you the last time I was in Egypt. When did you, as an individual, as an Egyptian man, as a man born in Egypt, when did you discover ancient Kemet, and how did that awakening change your life?
In the family, there are uncle. God bless his soul. He's passed now. Uncle is a brother to my mother. And you know, we have after a windy day, this uncle encouraged the children of the family to go after a windy day and look for artifacts laying on the ground. Mm-hmm. I was one of these kids, as you call them here in America, and to go and bring things back and give it to him, and he give a reward like a silver coin to buy a certain candy or something like that. I was one of those kids, and failure, that's what my mother said. I come back always with empty hands, and I spend all the time staring on the walls to know what's there, what is this? The writing, which is we call it hieroglyphics, you know. So I was captured by the writings and drawings on the walls, and I keep walking from one wall into another, and until the sun goes, and I have to return back home with empty hands. Yeah, and that's how I was involved in this. Even after the high school, I have chosen the archaeology college in Cairo University. It's called Fuad University. Fuad is the name of the father of King Pharaoh. But after the revolution, they turned it into Fuad. They turned it from Fuad into Cairo University. And that's how I'm involved with the archaeology. And it's taking me deeper and deeper.
And Stephen, it's got to be an incredible honor, Stephen, to have your teacher, your friend, your inspirer here in the United States with you in Boulder. How's the visit been going?
It's something that can't even be put in words, William. This is a dream for me for many, many years to be able to have Hakim as my guest. Whenever I go to Egypt, I'm treated like a son. I'm treated like a member of his family with incredible respect, and so it's wonderful to be able to reciprocate and have him here and dote on him and wait on him and have these incredible conversations that we have. Hakim has this amazing ability that I've told people, I've characterized him as a walking library. And it almost seems like it's inexhaustible. The well never ends. So every time we come, we get into, it seems like similar topics, but we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's an example of what we believe is what's happening for people, that consciousness will be awakening now, and we're going to be able to address these subjects that you're so interested in, and be able to go deeper and deeper and deeper as more information is revealed and as our consciousness and senses open.
Now, Stephen, you're a trained Egyptologist, and so that means that you probably had been given one set of lenses, and then you met Hakim. What was the transition like from a traditional mainstream approach into Hakim's core teaching? And how did you make that transition?
Yes, it's an excellent question. And actually, I never was someone who was an accepted Egyptologist. I began to study on my own. I've been trained in archaeology by one of the world's great prehistorians who's probably passed on Professor Francois Borde at the University of Bordeaux when I did archaeology in the 70s. He taught me field archaeology. But I came to Egyptology on my own, studied on my own, and very quickly went past academic Egyptology as not being complete, not being enough of the answer. I went into the metaphysical tradition, got involved with the Rosicrucian Order Amark in San Jose, California, went deep into the Masonic, Theosophical, and Rosicrucian traditions about ancient Egypt. But even that seemed like there was still something missing. So as I always say, to make a long story short, I discovered a book by Murray Hope, a British author, Wiccan priestess, and independent Egyptologist, who indicated in this book, it's called Ancient Egypt, The Serious Connection. I discovered it in the early 90s, that there still was a living tradition in Egypt. There still were people who kept the oral tradition, the old ways, way beyond before writing, before Egyptology recognized it, that there was a civilization. And so I went to Egypt actively seeking someone, and lo and behold, as you said, Hakim has been an active tour guide. He's basically semi-retired now, but still leads groups. I lead groups to Egypt, and Hakim works with our groups. And he's been doing this for 58 years. I mean, he's been living in the shadow. His village, Nazrat Essaman, is the village right by the Giza Plateau. From Hakim's balcony window,